Okay, now we're in the weeds. Let's go back onto the fairway for a moment. Okay. The meeting, the August 8th meeting of 2018 of the Building Appeals Board is off to an inauspicious start, but will be called to order on Wednesday, August 8th at 6:01 p.m. in the council chambers of Ojai City Hall. Members of the public wishing to address the Building Appeals Board on items appearing on the agenda are requested to complete a speaker's card and file it with, wait a minute, I'm convening, and file it with the secretary prior to the start of the meeting. Cards are available in the lobby. Speakers should state their name and address for the record, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes or less. Comments must be directed to the board, not the audience. While the Building Appeals Board is in session, all in attendance are expected to maintain order and decorum and to obey the orders of the chair. Shall we commence a roll call?
Yes, Chair Ulrich.
Here.
Chair Daddy. Member Daddy.
Here.
Member Murphy.
Here.
Member Farmer is always right here. And I am here, Dale Hanson.
Very good. In that case, then we'll segue to the Pledge of Allegiance. Ms. Murphy, would you like to lead?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Public communications is the time set aside during the Building Appeals Board meeting for the members of the public to address the Building Appeals Board on items of city business other than scheduled agenda items. Matters raised at this time may be briefly discussed by the board and will generally be referred to staff and or placed on a subsequent agenda. Under state law, other than for emergency items, no action on non-agendized items can be taken at this meeting. Do we have any speaker cards?
No, I have none. Chair.
Okay. It being the middle of summer, and at least I'm going to attribute it to that, there is not a lot of public interest in our deliberations, which is okay. Building officials report, is there one?
There's none.
Okay. We have for item 1 on the consent calendar, minutes of the Building Appeals Board meeting of the last meeting of July 11, 2018. Is that okay with everyone? Any comments? Any corrections? Any? Okay.
I move to approve.
No, you just need file as received.
Yes, file and receive, please. All right. Discussion items. Review the City of Ojai Municipal Code Title IX, Rebuilding Regulations, Chapter 8, Underground Utility Facilities. The recommendation is discuss and draft amendments to the City of Ojai Municipal Code Title IX, Building Regulations, Chapter 8, Underground Utility Facilities. All right. Is there it's a discussion item? Any comments or observations or recommendations?
Yes, I wondered about how the cultural resources enter into that. I read through this, but I don't recall seeing that. Because underground utility facilities.
Well, this will let me go back to the discussion, and I'll read the purpose, which is going to be applicable the rest of our items for discussion and our deliberations for the rest of the evening. As a part of City Council's assigned tasks of the Building Appeals Board, Council directed the BAB to conduct a one-time review and report to Council on contradictions, missing cross-references, or other issues requiring code text amendments in service to clarity and integrity of Title IX of the Municipal Code. The Building Appeals Board may wish to discuss, review, and identify additional changes prior to forwarding to City Council. Staff has no recommended changes. So, you were
Concerned, if there was any reference to cultural resources in this, where you start digging in the ground.
well, I think that's addressed under a different section of the city code and fairly, well, to the best of my knowledge, it's still a resolution and hasn't been codified.
Indians
Yeah,
don't
I
think
can
so.
Is that
confirm.
an accurate statement?
Yeah,
Mr.
I was
Vega?
going to say exactly what you said, which is we recently made some changes, and we did it by resolution intentionally so that if we see things that don't work, we can go back to council fairly easily and adopt a new resolution and not have to make changes to the ordinance. So I think it will be by resolution for the time being, or that's the plan. So.
Okay, I know of at least one other public agency in the valley that seems to think that approach is somewhat lacks commitment, and also and more importantly from the perspective of an applicant or someone needing to make some sort of penetration into the earth. And what you just confirmed is that it's in a constant state of flux.
Well, so I wouldn't say a constant state of flux, but we recently made a change, and I think the idea was
And-
allow it to be.
And how long has it
Flexible.
been a resolution? When was it?
The most recent was in, I believe it was May.
But I mean, I was going back to when it was initially.
Originally. It's been a few years. I think, and I don't have that off the top of my head. I think the
least a
original was
couple of
adopted in
years.
2016.
Yeah, at least a couple of years. So, okay, from my perspective, anyone else have any comment?
I just wonder how that,
My perspective is, why is this in Title IX?
Darn, you beat me to my perspective.
This is just zeros.
But you have to note something, Board Member Daddy. These are all promulgated in 1968. When underground utilities, and I believe we only have them pertinent in 2 tracks in this community. I might be wrong, might be 3. Were kind of a cutting edge.
Novelty.
No, it's cutting edge. Underground is a far better way. You know, there's maintenance and repair. There's lots of there's lots of as well as less of a safety issue. There's lots
For staff, will we find somebody with developing a current vacant lot where we have underground utilities on neither side being required to put in underground? And I say that with regards to the way we wrote the sidewalk. We kind of said, well, if you got it on either side, you got to do this, until somebody had it on either side, and we says, okay, you don't have to do it. And it's kind of like, boy, that was real clear. What is the intent, and what does it actually do for us today? I mean, I don't believe that we have any undeveloped properties that are underground and in that area of the community, but I certainly want to hear what you folks have got to say. I just don't want to mousetrap one person. Now, in the past, we've had one person that had to come in and underground where we had poles and either side wasn't undergrounded, and it seemed like that was a... Or I would make a motion that we void all sections of this document that were emanated in 1968, and then we can...
So you're saying the entirety of Chapter 8. Well, but I think the intent of this isn't specifically for one-off developments of lots. This is really oriented towards tract development. And I believe that most of these sort of requirements are addressed, would be addressed in Title 10 in any kind of a planning review.
Well, it could be Title 10 or the Public Works section.
Yeah, that's what
mean-
I'm saying. It's not appropriate to touch.
It's all, you got
Online.
to remember is like when the code was written,
Yes.
it's all about planning and development and all that kind of stuff. As far as undergrounding, I don't quote me on this, but I do believe it's determined by Edison who undergrounds and what. I do believe.
Exactly. And we're coming to that. Any system, be it in the air or underground, has Edison an engineered plan and they
Correct.
specify how it goes into the meter at one or more structures. And going through that right now on a project, a fairly large project with Edison, I can definitely attest to that, as well as, yeah. I
'cause
think
I-
that, so I don't see, since Edison is running this and every element of it to where it actually connects at the meter on the property, I don't see that this is
I
necessary.
make a motion that 9.8 be deleted
From
from the municipal code.
chapter 8, section 9.8
9.801 through,
through point 13. Okay, second?
Deleted or moved?
deleted.
Are you seconding it, Chair?
Yes,
Okay. Shall we make a roll call?
yes,
Chair Ulrich,
yes.
Member Daddy,
Yes.
Member Murphy,
Yes.
and myself, yes.
So
Do-
I just want to confirm so that we have it correct in our minutes for next time. We're going to repeal chapter 8.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I just want to.
Yes.
Now that we've said that, I should have asked the question before. Is there anything in chapter 8 that the code official needs to do his job and protect health and safety in the community that can't be applied somewhere else in the codes?
I don't see anything at this time. Again, so I'll give it, I don't see, honestly, I wasn't anticipating that question. So if I see something in my review when I go for the next time, I'll bring it up. I don't see anything at this point that the code will be a conflict there.
Right. Okay, discussion item number 3, which is discuss and draft amendments to the City of Ojai Municipal Code Title 9, Building Regulations, Chapter 9, Flood Protection. Discussion as a part of, well, I've already stated that. So staff recommends Chapter 9 in this instance to be relocated to Title 7, Public Works. Public Works Department is responsible for the drainage systems in the city and are the most knowledgeable resource to understand the impacts of the flood areas. Public Works Department is also responsible for reviewing the flood maps while they're being revised by FEMA. Aren't they always being revised by FEMA?
Every day.
Constantly. But
Yes.
when FEMA goes to release new maps, that's when they're reviewed. But going hand in hand, in what we're writing in the staff report there is that there's nobody more knowledgeable than the Public Works Director in the drainage system that we have currently and any upgrades and anything like that. So, that's why we're saying that should be turned over to the Public Works Director. Because it's currently listing the building official as the
Right,
as the flood
and that's
plain
for,
manager.
and that's for off-site and to a lesser extent, on-site storm drain systems, as well as, we should note that the county Public Works has purview over grading operations of more than 50 cubic yards, and as such, they're rather stringent about how things get done as well, and they have an entire raft of regulations as well as experienced inspectors. So I would gainsay that this, I don't, from my perspective, are there any other comments? Welcome.
Yes.
I just want to go on the record of saying, you look good.
Yes,
Yes.
there is a discussion. Do we want to look at the individual ones and see if there's anything to retain, or we just want to flush the entire section out? If we look at 99601, it's kind of interesting that the appeals board was the planning commission. In section 9, and it really looks like this definitely is land use, and it looks like it needs to be in 10. It looks like everything in 9.9 needs to go to 7. I do have a cause for two concerns. And I kind of need an explanation. Somewhere in here, I remember reading it, but I've had to read so many pages of documents. It asked for a code change, and I think we did that in a different section of 9, where we comply with FEMA in that we have 1 square inch of airspace on elevated floors per floor. So if we've got 1,000 square foot base floor, we have 1,000 square feet of air for water in and water out, because if not, then you get a 200% surcharge through FEMA. So we should build in a special zone like this to a special construction. The other thing that happens is I've had in the past the ability to go to the building official on a lot in Saddle Mountain where an incredibly small portion of an extremely large parcel had a tiny section of creek that ran through it with a 30 or 40 foot elevation separation, and was able to get the building official to sign off on that. How is that going to work? Is that going to mean that the city engineer over in the building over there, Public Works, is then going to be in charge of clearing the flood map for the construction on parcels now?
Yeah, they'll have, the Public Works Director would then just sign off that where they're putting it would be okay based on the FEMA map, or that they would have to comply with certain
Okay.
regulations.
Could we make sure when we send that to the city, that when we send it to city council, that we highlight that and make sure that we explain to them that's a significant change, and the people that we're changing the authority of who does what now on this flood? Because what I was looking for is a sign off on the construction of a home that had a little parcel, and that sign off had to be Mr. Stewart did that. And that was fine. We just need to designate and make sure that, we clearly state who does what now. And the appeal.
And Mr. Stewart would, based on this, been the floodplain manager, therefore he,
Oh, right,
directed by the
right.
the
So-
municipal code would have.
Right, so we need to let them know there's a significant change with that. Okay?
Yep.
And I would move that 9.9 intact be transferred to Title VII.
Okay, Chapter 9 to Title 7, is there a second? Okay. In that case, roll call, please.
Yes, Chair Brewer,
Yes.
Member Daly,
Yes.
Member Murphy,
Yes.
Member Palmer,
Yes.
and myself, yes.
Very good, it passes. Discussion item number 4, City of Ojai Municipal Code Title 9, Building Regulations, Chapter 10, Planned Drainage Facilities. Staff has no recommended changes. Staff does not anticipate any major fiscal impact from revising the City of Ojai Municipal Code.
I would recommend that this be transferred to Title 10 as they work with the drainage and the flood and the grading. And grading and flood and draining, those are all the same component. They should all be with the same oversight.
Chair, can I step in for a second?
Sure.
The building official here actually reviews grading plans on site. So on-site drainage systems actually would be reviewed by the building department. Once it leaves the property, then it becomes Public Works. Yeah.
I'll withdraw my motion. And move that we accept it as is. Thank you, Tom.
Okay, roll call.
Okay, there's no discussion. Chair
Yes.
Member Daddy?
Yes.
Member Murphy?
Yes.
Member Farmer?
Yes.
And myself, yes. So we're-
Okay, discussion item number 5. City of Ojai Municipal Code, Title 9, Building Regulations, Chapter 11, Hillside Erosion Control. Recommended changes to the City of Ojai Municipal Code, Title 9, Building Regulations, Chapter 11, Hillside Erosion Control include, there are one change, which is in the definition, a grading permit shall mean a permit issued by the city in conformance with the California Building Code.
Can I ask
Yes.
a question? So when
Discussion.
they say the clearing of the hillside, does that mean that you can't get rid of dead debris that's on a hillside? Without a,
It's referring to what is actually stabilizing it, not
not dead debris? I
not
mean,
dead
you
stuff.
could get rid of the dead
You
stuff.
can get rid of the dead stuff, overgrowth
That's
and
not
stuff like
clear.
that. It's referring to clearing and unstabilizing a slope.
Right, okay. Okay.
There's, on section 9-11.201, there isn't any, this is any grading or filling or clearing? That seems sort of broad.
No.
Sorry, which one was that?
Article 2, page 3 of 11, section 9-11.201, grading permits required.
We do have a minimum requirement for a grading permit. We can add that to that if you'd like.
And what
I
is
don't-
that minimum requirement?
I don't want to quote the exact number off the top of my head.
50?
I think it's 50 cubic yards.
That's kind of consistent with everybody else around
Yeah.
here. The county, most cities, so, okay. So, yeah, I think that would be important, because I know that matters to a lot of folks. You know, if you're gonna, you know, grade a driveway that, is only gonna involve 10 or 15 yards, that would not require a permit, and the expense of making an application for a permit, which involves quite a bit of drawings, plans, and I don't know what the permit itself is. Okay, grading permit exceptions.
Can I add one more
Sure,
thing to that?
sure.
On the second page of the staff report there,
Yes.
there is a change to that section, 201, which is changing from the city engineer to the building department would issue the permit.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Where are you?
That's on 3, page 3 of 11. Article 2, 9-11.201. The end of the first line would, instead of being city engineer, would be building official. Yeah. Okay, so you're gonna, that change, as well as the addition of 50 yards?
50 cubic yards?
Yeah,
Yards?
we'll add that. Right in that same sentence, we'll add in excess of 50 cubic yards.
Yeah, I think that would be the place for it, because then everything else goes into exceptions, which also don't reference yardage. Their square footage, but that's, okay.
Would you rather it be in an exception?
No, I think it should be within establishing the constraints, the parameters of where a grading permit is required. That's where I would expect to see it. Okay.
Jeff,
Yes,
could I make a comment?
absolutely.
Section 9-11-201, second sentence. All land within the boundaries of a development shall be graded to drain and dispose of surface water without permanently ponding. I would I know that swales are mentioned somewhere else in here, but I would think that we would want to bring their attention to any construction that might direct the water into the aquifer as opposed to the street.
That's actually all covered under the MS4 program. MS4 is part of the program that it's a requirement to keep water that falls on, in broad terms, to keep water that falls on your property to filter back through the property. So a technique that we use is swales, bioswales, which are made up of media that allow the water to infiltrate. There are systems that have overflow devices that would spill into a drainage system if it's inundated. So all of that is taken into account under those other devices. So what this is saying is they don't want grading that's going to occur that's going to cause, with asphalt or something, that's going to cause a ponding situation, and it has no chance of permeating into the ground.
Okay, what was the direction that you said it was covered under?
It's under the MS4 program. I gotta think.
That's the other game.
It's a.
MS-13.
I forget what it's MS, and then there's literally 4 S's.
I would make a recommendation that when we get done with all this, that we remove 11.2.201, since we've changed the grading from the city engineer to the city building official, then this particular section here is superseded by the person running it and the MS4. So I don't see where we need 201 at all.
201.
Staff have any reason that they could use 201?
What are you proposing?
I'm proposing that we lift that section because we've changed the permit from the city engineer to the building department. They issue the grading. And that since the water runoff is governed under another section, we need to eliminate the redundancy. We don't want to have the same item in 2 places. So I would recommend that we just lift 201 out and eliminate it. Not transfer it, just eliminate it.
Well, you've got several references to city engineer later in the, in this art.
We can fix that.
This is in reference to hillside erosion control. This whole chapter 11, is regarding hillside erosion control, and what that's saying is that if you're coming in to deal with hillside erosion, you can't leave and have a flat area that doesn't drain. So you can't eliminate the whole thing. You still have to have drainage. That's all that's referring to. And the grading, the permit is would be issued by the building official.
Okay, but it says city engineer.
We crossed that off and wrote building official.
Okay. And
So-
you want to leave all land boundaries then? Second sentence.
Yes.
Okay.
Article 1 deals completely with erosion, right? So we're covered with that.
Yep. So just to clarify, MS4 stands for Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System.
Severed.
Municipal.
Municipal?
Separate storm and sewer systems. Like where I'm from in the Northeast, in New York City, we have combined systems. We have sewer and water go to the same place. So stormwater and sewage mix.
Yeah, we don't do that around here.
No.
Yeah.
And then it goes out to the fish.
Well, that's
Well,
why they taste so
They've
good.
been, yes. That's why there's,
That's why they have both eyes on one side when they used to be on either side.
They're just flounders.
And fluke and flounders.
resulting in the eventual demise, but I understand that there's a resurgence across the river of the Hudson River oyster. So,
All right.
well, oysters.
Do we need this grading permit exception? It looks like you're gonna build a half-size swimming pool, which is a wader at 3 feet.
Sorry,
Oh, it says it's a 3 foot vertical depth and 200 square feet. Is that relevant?
no,
for an
that's
exception?
3
mean,
foot,
does
3
that
foot
actually-
vertical cut requires,
10 by 23 foot, I mean, that just seems like that's pretty
Okay,
rare, or no?
it's just setting a limitation.
Okay.
right. Speaking of limitations, are performance bonds required? I mean, are they required in practice?
We, as the building department, we don't require them. However, the public works department usually does.
Okay.
'Cause
And
this
this
is
whole-
another one that makes reference, and I'm referring to page 9 of 11. Section 911.402, performance bond. It's, shall not be released until erosion and sediment control measures have performed satisfactorily as determined by the city engineer for a period of 3 years. So if you're not, if the building official is not, but the public works director is for 3 years, no. And that's standard practice in public agencies that grant grading permits or in hillside areas?
I would have to check around the area and see how long their grading permits are held for. Not exactly sure.
Okay, so what do we do where there's a performance bond that's referenced in a chapter that we're gonna retain within the purview of the building official that is in fact not performed or required by the building official, instead it's it's Title 7.
Title 7.
So what do we do about that? Especially where the added complication of it, once again, being referenced as the determination made over 3 years of study. Probably 3 years, the 4 times it rains.
Well,
By the city engineer who's,
so I know from past experiences that, and I'm sure you understand, the purpose of the performance bond is to make sure that the work gets done.
yeah, but this is to make sure it performs.
It performs, correct.
This is typically speaking, if it's done, usually you have somebody who designed it. These days, an individual can't, you have to have a civil engineer. Civil engineer designs it, signs it, stamps it, signs it, and the civil engineer's license is basically on the line as far as the performance, if it's executed and inspected and confirmed that it's executed to the plan that was developed by the civil engineer. So I'm kind of going, really? A performance bond on top of that, when the civil engineer is the one that's responsible. And ostensibly, once he signs off on it, says it's good, it was reviewed and plan checked by the public agency, and everything should work. I just have a thing about leaving performance bonds in place when we're not really talking about the performance of the individual. You're talking about the performance of the work product.
That's why we're reviewing this. I understand what you're saying.
Okay.
So-
I would
Repeal that section?
yeah, I would,
Okay.
yeah, from my perspective anyway.
Give me the number of that, please.
That is number 9-11.402.
Did you suggest repealing it or just doing away with the
Yeah.
3-year period?
No,
Just
a
repealing?
performance bond is required in Title 7 by the Public Works Director for grading. I don't see that having it, this is a sort of a redundancy.
Yeah, we're not going to have a development that large in these cities that would
Well,
require.
no, this would technically apply to a single lot development.
And, exactly. I mean, that would be needed, that's what I'm saying, that would be needed for that
I
one.
understand according to the city's, the terminology, replacing a window can be, and has been described, at least by the community development director, as a development. So, yes, so all I'm just saying is, you know, I recognize that you don't have to review too many grading, for grading permit applications, but, yet we have all of this.
We do have grading permits.
Yes.
It's just that we don't need
A single
it's
lot
for a single lot development,
Yeah.
and we don't need a 3-year.
Exactly, exactly.
I agree.
Yeah, so, okay, so, any other further discussion, relative to, the somewhat arcane, sections? Drainage ways, sediment detention measures?
So you're eliminating that totally?
Yeah,
Just for.
yeah,
for
you know,
two.
yeah,
for
yeah, yeah,
two.
just that one section.
Yeah.
And then I'd also go,
Failure to-
Failure to comply or?
okay, yeah, I'd like to look at that there, too, which is, page 10 of 11.
9.11-0405?
Yeah, failure to comply. Since it also references a notification by the city engineer. That whole thing really should be in Title 7. Shouldn't it?
Is that a question?
Yes,
I don't
that is the
see it.
question, should it not? And do I have any consensus on that?
Okay, then go to 406 if you want to change it, and tell me what happens when you change that, how does it change 406?
Appeals.
Any person aggrieved, where is the appealing agents?
City council.
Yeah, it says a council.
Just reiterating.
Well, it says it may approve the modified plan. I thought Title IX went to Building Appeal Board for appeals. Well, it says they can approve the modified plan. Doesn't say an appeal. Appeal signed by.
Yeah, 406, any person aggrieved by the imposition of conditions on 9/11/406.
You know, it's being treated like it was intended, let's see, the
For
year,
somewhere
there it
else.
is, the 80s again, like there was a potential or a likelihood of development on a larger scale. So that would be something that would be in the interests of city council to hear an appeal over requirements, because typically speaking, the larger the scale of the development, the more costly the adherence to any conditions that are imposed, and as a consequence of a disagreement regarding and aggrieved by the imposition of conditions, would want to take it to city council because it involved larger scale and more money.
So what motion do we have now?
Well,
Talk about repealing it,
Why?
sending it to Title VII.
if you're going to leave this in Title IX, then it should reference the Building Appeals Board because it's a construction.
That's what I said.
Okay, but that means that section needs to be rewritten.
What do we have for staff's recommendation?
Says appeal to the council. Should say appeal to the Building Appeals Board.
God, this
But you might be interested in
we sure
this.
had crappy attorneys. Our attorneys
Yeah.
are way crappy now.
Yeah.
How'd they get there? With the long walk.
Well, it's also, that's a fresh
Well,
water.
we'll get to that, so.
So, yes,
They can get there.
yeah.
What, declaring martial law, burning down the town, what the hell, they got crazy.
Okay, so what we would recommend is take this, move it to
7.
Title 7, and then leave the building official just as the issuer of the grading permit.
Are you saying take the whole section?
Just like we did for 9.
I make a motion that we do that.
Second.
Okay, so the motion is that we're putting this whole section to Title VII?
Accept the building
But-
official designation.
Okay.
You're gonna leave the performance bond issue, though, as repealed?
Yes, the bill,
Yes.
yeah, that needs to be,
Yeah,
and
All
do
right.
we have any reason that we need to do that again? Because you have the engineer by the tail. He's got the wet stamp. He's responsible. He's got the E and O. We can't get away from it.
Unless the unusual condition is that the Director of Public Works somehow wishes or to redesign the system. So,
So, all right, so,
I've made a motion.
yes, and it
And we
was
have a
seconded.
second? Chair?
well, yeah.
One more quick thing.
Yeah.
What we can do, when we come back to this section, just in the future, we can get the Public Works Director's opinion on that, just so you guys can hear it, and then we can let you know about the performance bonds. And just let you, just in case there's something that we're missing on it, we can let you know if there's something on a reason why he wouldn't be able to agree to it.
Well, yeah, but what I'm looking at is this is our recommendation.
100%.
He
I just want to make sure that,
Greg is known to me for being willing to take a bite at the apple. At this particular instance, if he wants a performance bond, then he needs to bring it up. At this particular point, our recommendation is the performance bond goes away.
Not a
Okay? That failure to comply goes away. I still think that section 406, appeals, needs to be rewritten, because if it goes to Title VII, it has to have somebody besides City Council as an appeal a body, simply because something like that's, it's pretty complicated. And if it comes to the council.
It's simple. The Building Appeal Board has oversight over the building official. The building official's left in there as the issuer. Then the Building Appeal Board stays in and substitutes the
as-
City Council as
Okay.
the.
Well, that's our
is
recommendation.
the section or whatever we want to call ourselves that's got the oversight on that.
Okay?
Because it has to do with the building officials.
right.
Adding that to their motion?
Yes,
Oh,
it's
wow.
revising section 406, appeals.
Say, to
to
the
re-
Building Appeals Board.
Yes.
not
So
the
you're
city.
eliminating the city council then?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, okay.
so do you want the same wording for the appeals that we would have, for any appeal that we have, that we've written previously, correct?
Yeah, right, because, I mean, it's consistent with the building official and the appeals board.
I just want to make sure that I have it worded properly.
Right.
So, okay, I just want to make sure that we have this correct. The whole chapter is being relocated to Title VII, Public Works. And then in the chapter, we're going to rewrite it. We're going to add the building official as the
Issuer.
issuer of the grading permit. We're going to add exceeding 50 cubic yards. We're also going to repeal the performance bond section. We're going to repeal failure to comply, and then we're going to rewrite the appeals as it is for any building appeals board appeal
On 406.
on 406.
Yeah.
Okay? I just want to make sure that we're open up.
Is there anything that you think that we've deleted that shouldn't be, or that we need to add back before I finish my motion? I make
Not-
them-
I mean, these are,
Straightforward.
they're straightforward. These are your recommendations, so.
Okay. I make it the recommendation as explained by our building official.
Okay, Chair Ulrich,
Yes.
Member Daddy,
Yes.
Member Murphy,
Yes.
Member Farmer,
Yes.
and myself, yes, so it passed.
Okay. Discussion item 6. City of Ojai Municipal Code Title IX, Building Regulations, Chapter 12, Seismic Safety. Staff recommends the City of Ojai Municipal Code Title IX, Building Regulations, Chapter 12, Seismic Safety, be repealed as the items in this chapter are covered in the California Building Code. Discussion.
Yeah.
Well,
And this is also something that's constantly being revised in the building code, so.
That's why it's easiest to use the building code, because then you wouldn't have to update the
Current, you
municipal
wouldn't
code.
have to, exactly.
so, may I
It's a
ask
lot
you-
easier, it's a lot easier to just adopt
But you
the
don't
building
have
code.
all of these cool equations in the city, in the city code.
You could come in and read
Municipal
them all
code.
you want in the building code, we have them
No, these
available.
these are all like, engineering stuff.
In 1991, they engineered for a slip strike. We had a thrust fault.
Yes.
None of the equations.
Darn missed,
None of the equation works.
yes.
It
Okay,
was like
so,
a shotgun shell in a 22. Didn't work.
we're going to, make a motion to follow the, recommendation of staff.
I have a question.
Oop.
We had talked about soils, and we had talked about the imposition of a 27-inch footing in the past. We had some discussion with that, and we had discussion where we had 160 square foot sheds that needed a 27-inch footing at Boyd Ford's place. Where are we currently on that? What makes sense in regards to having a tiny house that may actually be able to be constructed at 70 square feet?
Okay, so with the tiny homes that went through planning commission, those are mobile homes. They won't be on a foundation. They will more than likely be a tie-down system. So they're going to be just like a mobile home of foundation.
Now, that's the wheels. I'm just
That's the
talking
wheels.
about ADU, small capacity ADU, not with wheels. I mean real ADUs that,
It's a habitable space. It would have to meet the minimum building code. Now, it is the BAB's recommendation to set it at what the minimum
12 inches.
12 inches. I've been very honest with you. I'm not going to recommend that on the staff level. We're gonna recommend 27 inches. Now, there is a way around not doing a 27 inch, and that you can always engineer out of it. If you don't want to do a 27 inch deep footing, that is just a design standard. Without, a single family home doesn't necessarily need an engineer. You can do conventional framing and not have an engineer or an architect. A normal person without a license can design their own home. Okay? It is my recommendation. I've been to several houses throughout the city that have cracked slabs and things like that due to expansive soils. So it's going to be my recommendation that we do a 27-inch deep footing, and if there is a soils report and a engineer that comes by, that writes a report confirming the soils with the calculations, then they would be able to do that.
The problem with that scenario is the cost of the engineer and the soils report far exceeds what the cost
The
of the
cost of
concrete.
the concrete is.
So you basically are saying it's gonna go the water route, which is you're gonna wind up doing it. And the issue is, crack slabs, in my experience, and I've seen a few myself, are the product of having been put down on either cut fill, unengineered fill, even undisturbed fill. So they would have cracked, high degree of likelihood regardless of what the foundation was. And that,
And pre-rebar.
well, I'm not
And
even,
they
I
put
don't
in
even want to
screen.
go with reinforcement. So the reality of the situation is that 27 inches is What is the state standard? Is there a state building code standard?
It's 12 inches, which
Right.
is the building code.
And that's-
And
yeah.
that is, again, I'm just explaining, that's what you guys are recommending.
Yeah.
And I'm going to recommend a 27-inch footing, just being honest with you. Everywhere else in the county uses a 27-inch footing.
Well,
So-
but, you know, and everywhere else in the county, you know,
That-
has
that's
fire
why we're
sprinklers
here.
where we don't either. So, I mean, the reality of the situation is, not everybody looks at things the same way.
I understand.
So, okay.
Okay,
all right.
I'm gonna go ahead and recommend we do the current building code with the elimination of the 27-inch, 27-inch foundation,
Yeah.
With the elimination of it.
with the elimination of the
And
27-inch.
where was that in this section?
That has nothing, yeah, that's not a part of this. This is about seismic
Yeah,
safety.
yes, and all we're doing with this one is following, the vote is going to be on, the motion is to follow staff recommendation, repeal the items in this chapter as they are covered in the California Building Code. So do we have a second?
Second.
Okay,
Okay.
so,
Chair Ulrich?
yes,
Member Daddy?
Yes.
Member Murphy?
Yes.
Member Farmer? And myself, yes.
I have a question. Tom, so city council will hear our recommendation to eliminate it, right? But you're recommending 12.
So, no, I'm going to,
Oh, 27.
27.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, so you're recommend, the way, you guys are not recommending anything. You guys are going to say that the building code stands.
follow the code.
Follow the building code. And so just like we changed some certain things, I'm going to add in there, and it's nothing against you guys. It's just,
You feel strongly?
I feel strongly about that opinion.
All right,
So,
fair enough.
Well,
Okay.
and I hope it can be written up that the BAB recommends nothing above state code. And then yours will be
we'll be exceeding.
county standard, but we need to make it clear it's state code,
We
12 inches state
we
code.
will be,
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, discussion item 7, City of Ojai Municipal Code Title 9, Building Regulations, Chapter 13, Transportation Demand Management. Staff has no recommended changes. Staff does not anticipate any major fiscal impact from revising the City of Ojai Municipal Code. So, what do we think of Transportation Demand Management, Chapter 13?
I have no idea where this goes in the code. It doesn't belong here.
It is, the purpose and goals are the Ventura County Transportation Commission, VCTC, is responsible for the preparation of the Congestion Management Plan, CMP, for Ventura County. One of the state mandated elements of the CMP is a trip reduction and travel demand management element that promotes alternative transportation methods such as carpools, van pools, transit, bicycles, walking, and park and ride lots, improvement in the balance between jobs and housing, and other strategies, including flexible work hours, telecommuting, and parking management programs. The goals and policies of the congestion management plan also support the increased use of low and no emission vehicles. The VCTC must also determine annually whether the county and cities within the county are conforming to the CMP, including the requirement to adopt and implement a travel demand management ordinance to improve both congestion and air quality. So, since this chapter is intended to promote trip reduction and travel demand measures in the city and meet the travel demand management facilities ordinance adoption requirement as set out in Ventura County Congestion Management Program, is this something that we are mandated to have in our city code, our municipal code?
I don't know if we're mandated, but I think it does fit more with planning and, traffic mitigation and those types of.
Seems that way. Yeah.
I'm particularly interested in the fact that if you have industrial manufacturing, 95% of the property needs to be in parking. That's pretty amazing.
That
Especially
is.
the fact that we haven't complied with any of our own parking standards lately. So, I guess I'll make a motion, we eliminate it from Title IX, and I have no idea where the city would want to salvage it to.
Well, the problem is it has penalties. This is from 1993, and they
Yeah,
probably
that's-
really wanted to, however, there's no actual indication of the parameters of what those penalties are. It says who might be guilty, it says who might, upon conviction thereof. It's an infraction or misdemeanor, so I would suggest that, that in the interests of clarity and conciseness and the integrity of Title IX, that we delete it, we repeal it.
It is interesting, it says that the firms and people shall be punishable as provided in this section. It actually doesn't say the $50 a day, $1,000 a day, $100
Yeah,
a
there's no,
day.
there's.
It actually doesn't say like the rest of them do, it doesn't give a time for imprisonment
Yeah, and.
either.
And once again, it was promulgated and codified in 1993. I think some things may have changed since then.
You think?
I think lots of things may have changed since then. So, having no interest in revising it and updating it, because I think that most of this addresses policy that is either within the purview of Title 10 planning or county and state policy, and regulations within the purview of those entities, that we don't really need this in the Ojai Municipal Code. Do I have a second on that?
I'll second it.
The chair is not supposed to make the motion.
Oh, excuse me. Do I have a motion?
You want to eliminate this from Title IX?
I
Yes.
would like to see it move to 10 and let them,
Is that your motion, Judy?
sure, why not? It seems to me that planning and commission may find a project before them that has an increase in traffic and that they could use these suggestions or parameters.
Do you bear in mind that the suggestions and parameters start with non-residential development serving 50 employees and 100 employees?
Well,
I think
150.
there's,
Yeah,
I
right.
think there's, we have, what is it? We have two entities, that's the inn and the school district.
Hospital too, Brendan.
Oh, in the hospital, you think more than 100? No.
They're the largest employer, but they don't have 100.
Yeah.
No.
No, so, you
Largest
know,
employer is
it
the
really
school.
needs to be rewritten. If it's from 1993, it really needs to be rewritten if you want to rewrite it, or you want to, if you're making a recommendation to transfer this to Title 10, it's going to be transferred in the condition that it's in.
Oh,
Unless somebody says, no, we need to rewrite, it's just going to wind up going to a different, if that recommendation is enacted by the city council. So it's still going to wind up in the Ojai Municipal Code. I don't think that this entire
Well,
thing is
planning and
appropriate.
commission could review it and change
The
it.
same format's going to end up in.
Yeah, they
They could do that.
rewrite it to
could.
bring it up to code.
Well,
It
we
might
could
give them-
recommend that they
It might.
update
that-
Planning Commission's actually gonna do a Title 10 cleanup starting next month
so
too.
they can.
So, and they actually have asked for,
They found something to meet on.
and
very nice,
they've asked
very
me for a
nice.
list of all the things moving to.
So would you
they'll-
want to hurry up and jam this into 10 so they can clean it up?
Well, see, that's what I'm just saying. This is 25 years, and
Let's make a motion.
no, I know that. I'm just saying, I'm proposing, I would like,
Make a
but, okay, so what
My
you,
motion is that we recommend this be
Mr. Vega,
updated.
maybe you
move
could
the
turn off the
planning,
air and we'll
to
still be
section
cold for
10.
45
Title
minutes
nine.
and we'll
Title
be out of
10.
here.
Title
And we'll
10.
conserve some
And
energy. You know, it's kind of like
updated by the
flooring it on
planning
the
commission.
downhill and then gliding.
Okay. I'll second that.
all right? So Go ahead.
Chair Ulrich?
Yes.
Member Daddy?
Yes.
Member Murphy?
Yes.
Member Farmer?
Yes.
And myself, yes, so it passes.
Okay, so was that, what, was our motion, clear, I guess, is what I meant, okay. Discussion item 8.
Okay.
Discuss and draft amendments to the Ojai, City of Ojai Municipal Code Title 9, Building Regulations, Chapter 14, Traffic Impact Mitigation Fees for Maintenance and Improvement of City Streets. Staff has no recommended changes, and staff does not anticipate any major fiscal impact from revising the City of Ojai Municipal Code, Chapter 14.
Do we do traffic mitigation impact fees now, as I'm looking at 914/4? The traffic impact mitigation fee shall be paid as a part of any permit. Are we doing that?
Yes, I believe so. Yes.
You know, the language in here seems to be a little weird, which is, hey, we don't have the infrastructure for anything, so we'll allow them to build everything, and then we'll just charge them a mitigation fee when it doesn't work. And we'll allow the creation of gridlock as long as we get enough money. That's just disgusting. You
Well,
know, I mean, that is under 91402, purpose D. The
Have you
city
looked-
council finds and declare that this chapter and action taken pursuant to these items are necessary to provide a fair and equitable method of mitigating the significant cumulative environmental impacts on traffic generated by development and redevelopment in the city, instead of don't build above the current infrastructure, and we won't add extra impact. It just doesn't make sense the other way, so. I don't know what your thoughts are, but we've got what we got. We're 4.5 square miles. That's about it. I don't see us putting an east-west or north-south road in. I don't know where in the world we actually put one within the city. Although they're trying to pop one down at the end over here. They bought a lot or two, but maybe we could put a road in by the bike path that goes from Fox Street over at the
We've been talking about
at the
athletic-
gym, all the
athletic
way
club.
over to Bryant Street through Fulton,
Yeah.
along those lots. But I just really don't see, and
That's a development thing, that isn't even traffic mitigation.
no, I get that.
So, and if you look at 14.05, there's another formula for computation of a fee that requires 2/3 of a page to explain what the elements are, the components are in the equation. I would submit that would be a difficult,
Yes.
Yeah, right.
and the purpose is for maintenance and improvement of city streets. So I can't feature that this produces much income from that perspective, since, do we have any idea on that? If there's, what these fees are generating, if any?
I think both this and the, I have numbers for, in my mind for this and the parking fee. I think they're both pretty minimal, and very rarely do projects actually trigger each of those.
Is there no other place in the city code they can do that? I mean, this is ridiculous. Between 2003 and 2020 and $2,004. Really? I mean, that's going to take an engineer, not a banker, to figure out how much money you're going to pay.
In reading this, I don't think was very well written.
I think we got duped. I
Very
think
dense.
the attorney that wrote this made a lot of money.
Yeah, I'm thinking of a particular city attorney. Yeah, well, do I have a motion?
I'd like to ask a question.
Okay, that's almost as good as a motion.
Does staff feel that any of this is actually relevant or necessary, that is not covered in another section with a fee schedule or something else? or can be imposed at the time with other powers other than having this. Without this, when somebody's going to do a 10-unit development over here, down from Seafresh or across from Seafresh, is there's any way to, I mean, how do you mitigate traffic on Ojai Avenue? It's, 60, 55 feet wide. It's not going to go anywhere. And we're certainly not going to expand that 30-foot street on the side. And so how do we mitigate traffic at the old ironworks or across the street at the vacant lot next door to Seaford? That's what I'm trying to figure out in my mind, or next to
What do we
the,
do with the wine place?
well,
Zillion cars
we
coming
rolled
in and
over on that. But what do we do with the lot next to Valley Rio? What do we do at the lot next to the old vegan place? I mean, we still have a few lots, but it doesn't appear you can mitigate traffic unless you make them park outside and give them a bike, and our past mayor tried that once before. So is there anything that's critical? Is there anything that's really important in here for you to have to be able to provide fair and equitable fees and adequate compensation?
So my thought is that this is, that this affects planning fees and would only come up, in planning scenarios, not the building scenario necessarily. So I think it would be a question better asked of the planning commission and planning director. And so I think at that point, this is another one that could be suggested as part of that Title 10 review and cleanup.
Migrated over?
I also would question the appeals process. I mean, they've got it in here as the community development director kind of running the whole show as judge and jury, which,
That's what I mean. This thing is not well written.
No,
And
can we just,
from my perspective, I would propose repealing it. If they need something, then it can be adopted. That makes sense. This whole thing is just bad.
yeah, it is.
There's no, I mean,
Do we
kicking
have
it
a
down the
motion?
road
Let's move.
for planning to look at is, I don't think, just because it seems that would be within the purview. From my perspective, we're making a recommendation, and this is poorly written, it's confusing, it doesn't produce a lot of fees, it's not necessary.
It's not current, it's outdated.
Yeah, so,
it's,
So what's the motion?
I can't make motions.
I know you can't. Judy told you.
Want to make a motion?
Yeah, I make a motion that we repeal this
Entirety,
entirety, right?
okay?
We're not sending it to Title 10, we're just repealing it.
Yeah.
Just repealing it in its entirety.
And is there a second?
I second.
Okay,
Okay, Chair Ulrich,
yes.
Member Daddy,
Yes.
Member Murphy,
yes,
Member Farmer,
Yes.
and myself, yes.
Okay, discussion item number 9.
Now we actually have something to speak about.
Discuss and draft amendments to the City of Ojai Municipal Code Title IX Building Regulations, Chapter 15, Vacant Property Maintenance, Security, and Registration. Staff has no recommended changes. Staff does not anticipate any major fiscal impact from revising the City of Ojai Municipal Code. Some of this looks familiar.
Mine's got Bob Daddy written on it.
Some of this is from Palm Springs by way of Long Beach, and it's got then Mayor Blatz did the adoption. As I look at this, I'm confused as if, what this smacks to me is just discrimination. And here's why it's discrimination. When we have tools and we don't use the tools equally, it appears that it's a discrimination issue. As I take a look at the first appellant that became before the board, there was an agreement that fence would come down over 2.5 years ago, and it would be cleaned up. And there was an agreement that things would be posted, we'd know who the management company was, There would be registration, it would be monitored, we'd have property manager, and not a single thing. I'm gonna recommend that we delete this because we don't have the will to enforce. And when we have the will to enforce, when we pick out a single party, in my opinion, that's just blatant discrimination, because you guys have the power to condemn like you did with the Chevrolet property, drive a bulldozer over it just like we did, run fines up for $100,000 like we did, and confiscate the property. We've already done that. We've already showed that we've got a 10-year-old vacant lot to prove that we've got the authority, and we did nothing with that 10-year-old vacant lot. So I don't even know. If we're not going to enforce, let's just get rid of the rules, because it appears we have 50 people that have got issues, and occasionally we pick one party to pick on. And we go through the process. I can't understand why that agreement with the owner didn't cause the removal of that hurricane fence on Ojai Avenue in Golden West. It's still there. And it's pretty clear in here that these are not allowed. And it's pretty clear in here that the scoff isn't by the property owner. It's really by the city that takes a look at it every day and says, we're going to turn a blind eye and we're not going to do it. And what we have in Ojai is, I want what they have. We're always running into this. Well, if they can do this there, why can't I do this here? Right, Tom? Hasn't that been here the entire
Exactly.
decades you've been here?
Yeah.
That's what it is for me. I have people complaining all the time that Sally gets to do this, therefore Judy should be able to do it, therefore Dale should be able to do it, because they won't enforce the first one. So I don't know what you think. I think this was a good attempt. I think at one time we had a bunch of blighted buildings, but we don't have landscape in front of these. We don't have the plaque. We don't have the property manager. We don't have the phone number there. We don't have the registration. We don't have any of this stuff.
You know, I have to make an observation about that particular hurricane fence you're talking about. There is a company name on it.
That's, okay, oh,
and
I'm
it's-
not gonna
and-
steal your thunder.
Okay, and I called that company, and it turns out that fence is a rental fence. And probably would take nothing more than a call from the city, from a city official, or the building official, or an inspector to say, you know, you're in violation, that fence is in violation, and fence companies know about that kind of stuff. And you're in violation of quote them, the section of the Ojai Municipal Code that it's in violation of. And I'm sure they'll be pleased as punch to take it down. It becomes a security issue maybe, then for the structure, but once again, that's the owner's responsibility. The fact is that the owner does not own that fence, and I think that's kind of unfortunate, because the company's been making has a very good thing there, with a rental fence that's been there for, I think he said in excess of 11 years.
In excess of a
No, that
decade.
fence could have been bought and sold several times.
Well, you know,
so-
we've been talking about this for the last 4 to 5 years.
Yeah, we had an appeal.
Well,
from
you
that.
also,
mean,
you
and
also
nothing-
have a 6-foot fence on the,
Yeah.
in the right of way. It's the other part of it, it's in the city right of way. So that's really, would be another issue from the perspective of the Public Works Director. You have the same situation with the property, the L-shaped property behind Casa del Lago.
Okay.
Yeah, that's just east
It's on
on
South Fulton,
Ojai Avenue.
and yeah.
You have that 6-foot fence right up against the sidewalk. That's Bob Walk's property. It's the old Forest Service property.
But you know, this, and the properties, it's like they're not, I mean, you see them every day. You drive by them, tourists come in, and we've been talking about this
Part of
for
our
the.
acquaintance.
Yeah, and, I don't understand it.
Well, you know, here, you know, section 9, 15.17, violation penalty. this isn't very specific, but by the same token, it actually, in its generality, is very, it's enforceable. Because I think we went over this.
We did.
Violations of this chapter shall be treated as a strict liability offense regardless of intent. For the public, strict liability means if the condition is a fact, then then the owner or the lessee is responsible and is strictly liable under the Ojai Municipal Code. And any person, firm, and/or corporation that violates any portion of this section shall be subject to prosecution, and/or administrative enforcement under Title I, Chapter 6 of this code. And that is an administrative code that basically says the building official or the city can enforce the provisions of this section.
Well, Mr. Chairman, it seems like we, one of our appeals 3 to 4 years ago, when Mr. Daddy was the chairman,
Was it that long?
probably, we went over this.
Yes.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, because a lot of this is from 2015.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what's happened with it. Here
So,
we look-
Can
here
I,
we're-
can I make one note about
here
this?
we're looking at it again.
I, everything in here is actually, I hate doing this, but, everything in here is actually a planning thing. It's a planning item, because it's only talking about community development and the community development director. So, if you look at the director means the director of community development or designee. The department means the Ojai City Community Development Department. And then the only reference to official is building official, or building official is where it states official. But majority of these items is a planning item.
Yeah, but the thing is, when this was handed to us to revise and make recommendations it was handed to the Building Appeals Board because it related to buildings that are already constructed. That isn't a planning thing anymore. Okay? That's number
okay.
one. Number two, vacant buildings are health and safety.
Okay.
Which is also related to, as you well know.
Mhm.
So bottom line on it is, no, this isn't something to give to Title 10 because it's already been built. And this is a result of someone's ownership, occupancy, use that has fallen. If there are plenty of elements in the Ojai Municipal Code, Title 10, that could be that could be brought to the attention of the Planning Commission, but they don't really have any enforcement. It's the building official that has enforcement. And we've had 2 appeals here in the city, and one before this board, that addressed specifically that from a perspective of health and safety building official enforcement. So I'd say not only do we have a precedent, but understanding. The comments that have been here tonight have to do with, I don't think, I'll distill them. I don't think the Planning Commission would be able or willing or interested in enforcing this. And it's been handed to us, and we were interested enough in it to promulgate a revision. Took a while, took about 3 meetings, as I recall. But the comments are because we put some work product, some effort into this. I think we produced a reasonably concise work product, and it has to be utilized, or else it's so. And that's kind of where we're at. And we, as I recall, Yeah, went through this really carefully. So, do you have any other comments you'd like to make?
I have a couple of questions. Where does this get into planning and zoning, which I thought Title 10 was? Here's what I thought, and I want to make sure I get this right. Planning and zoning is about things that may or might be. The building department is for those that actually are. And then it becomes conditional for those that are, because they actually exist. And then it has to do with the repair, the health and safety. And where I thought we got brought in on this was a few building permits were issued to this building. And those are the ones that became the contentious issue, because the permits were issued by the
After the
building
fact.
authority after the fact, and Mr. Stewart, and then we had the appeal. But it involved the building official. And so anything with the building official would be with the BAB. Again, I don't see where this comes into zoning and land use, because they're already done.
Yeah.
Now, if they're gonna repurpose a building like the bowling alley, that's absolutely fine. But if it's a vacant building forever, that, I think, really should be 9. And I think we should either do away with the enforcement or do the enforcement. And I think that the council, again, they went ahead and got this, and they said, okay, everything's fine, and we're not gonna do it.
Right, and it says fee imposed is vacant for more than 90 days for any reason. I mean,
It's all concise, it's all legal, it's all taken from other cities,
Okay, so-
except other cities enforce it.
Really what you're saying then is the one recommendation we would be making to council was enforce it.
yeah.
Or lose it.
Well, just enforce it.
And just a note is that we have enforced this recently. It's just, the challenge with code enforcement is, since we can't publicize or publicly state what we're enforcing, I think people tend to see maybe the properties that aren't enforced and take that as that we aren't enforcing, but we have used this section recently to enforce.
Well, they kind of stand out a little more because the ones that are most egregious, there is no apparent enforcement. And you know, I gotta say, it's kind of like and I'm sure the city attorney has an opinion on this, but, and I'm sure that it would be tracked back somehow to California, government code somehow, but, it's kind of like the Brown Act. What are the implications of a violation of, the parameters of a code compliance, action? People's names don't have to be disclosed. The fact that the manner in which the city approaches this is there isn't any proof of any activity to anyone except the owner, and perhaps. And as a consequence, the perception among interested parties is nothing's happening because, as I started, the more egregious and ostentatious and obvious vacant buildings remain vacant for years. So,
I have a question. When we have a public hearing and we have an administrative result and we have an agreement as part of that administrative result, why is that protected?
So that's a specific
We have
question without a lot of,
we have a specific question
Detail.
on the bowling alley where the owner agrees that they're in violation and they agree to mitigate. Why then is that protected when the city takes action? When the city took action with the Chevrolet property, they fined him $1,000 a day, went to court, which is a public filing, and then confiscated the property for the fees.
yeah, and you're hitting on some of the things that differentiate. If there is a public filing, it becomes public record. If it's a health and safety issue,
Well,
it can
well,
become
this is a
public record.
this is a public record that we've already been through. So why then would finding and taking action against the property through code complaint be
Confidential.
confidential? Why would it be restricted? It's already an action agreed to that hasn't been followed up on. So I don't see where there's any confidentiality, but my recommendation is the city follow up on the statutes they've written. I mean, I'm just, hey, you know what? They're gonna have a price to pay because we got an election coming up. All right, they're gonna be campaigning.
There'll be some specific questions too.
And I don't think it's fair to me to look like we have a cage compound on the corner of this community. I don't think it's fair to me that we allow, and the planning commission has been absolutely derelict, and I'll cite that tape, which is the official record. And the community development has been derelict in the fact that they know that we have Cosentino wire on the frontage on Bryant Street that's not allowed. And I have lots of correspondence from Mr. Mullane, who was the prior community development director. I'll be more than happy to forward to you. And it was discussed at the council, a commission brought up by Paul Crabtree, and asked about the height and the type of fence, and asked if it was compliant. And the answer by the then community development director, Kathleen Wald, was no, it's not. And so what we do acknowledge that we have these issues, and then we don't do enforcement.
Yeah, and Tom, you and Jim, we're not aiming it, because it was prior to your coming here. But we met on health and safety on this one particular building we're talking about on Ojai Avenue. And we not only met on that, we met on people hanging out in there, the condition of the building. And we met on that. We made specific recommendations. And nothing has been done. And, when people hear that you're on the Building Appeals Board, one of the biggest questions I get is, what's happening to that building? And you can't answer them. So,
It's a reasonable question. I would take you up on your offer if you can forward those emails to me. I can look at them. To date, I have not heard of or been involved with that project.
And what I'll do is we'll look at the date, and I'll provide you the date so you can actually pull the tape, and that's the public record. And here's what it had to do with, so you get how weird this place is. We had a panic attack, and we're going to have a lot more, but we had a panic attack because the redemption, not the recycle, the redemption center behind the hardware on El Roblar in Miners Oaks closed. The panic is by law, if we don't have a redemption center, we can't sell anything in a bottle or a can or plastic. And that was the hair on fire issue at that time with the redemption. So nobody in town's going to be able to sell bottled water. That's how weird we get and go over the top. And so the discussion is putting a redemption center on Bryant Street. And we went through this whole thing about what we were going to do. And that's when it was brought up is, what are you going to do about that Cosentino wire when you have this redemption center and you put that in there and where that's going to be? So that kind of came up as a kind of an accidental issue. But still, we have a lot of these things around here, and they're non-compliant. And we go to one person's house and, hey, they got a fence. That's got to come down. Then you look at another whole area. And, with the electronics and all the other stuff now, and the cameras and the alarms, we don't need to have these big barbed wire barricades all over the place, in my opinion, especially when they don't comply.
So what are we doing here?
So what we're going to do is we're going to make a recommendation that the council determine if they actually want the vacant building endorsement, or if they actually think that they're going to enforce the endorsement that was so important to get here, and then has had no registration, no fees, no follow-up, no compliance Because it states, they have to follow up, they need to let you go, you need to put who the property manager is, it needs to be clear, they need to register. None of those things have been done.
So they either need to enforce or,
Just
The,
enforce.
if this section of Title IX is enforced, it actually generates sufficient revenue to support the staff time necessary.
okay, so.
But it does take the will to enforce it.
Right.
So, let's, at this point, yeah, let's, is there,
Or not.
is there a?
Yeah, I'm
motion?
making a
Are
motion.
we recommend, what are we recommending?
Recommending that they enforce or drop it?
Enforce.
Okay.
Enforce or drop it because it's arbitrary, capricious, and discriminatory.
We'll-
When they,
Not all there.
when they do enforce it, they don't enforce the same condition next door. That's
Okay,
my problem.
enforce or drop it, that's your
and-
motion, more or less, okay. Chair
And the-
Ulrich, I'm sorry.
Second.
Oh, okay, sorry, in a second, okay.
Yes,
Wait, I'm sorry, do enforce or drop it? What happens if they drop it?
But
The same thing now, nothing, because we're not doing anything. We only use these obscure things to randomly bash somebody.
Should we give them the option of dropping it?
that's, I recommend, you mean, recommendation is, as I understand it, to
Enforce it.
enforce or
Eliminate
repeal.
it, just forget it. Okay.
The problem with that, though, is in another year or two, we'll have a new situation. And if they've dropped this, we will not have the code to deal with the problem.
But the hope is that by giving them this option, that they'll realize that, well, maybe we better enforce it
Well-
They may take the option and say, okay,
and drop it.
yeah, drop
Well-
it. We're gonna drop, we got too many other things.
Judy, you have a vacant lot on Mercer. You and I know that lot well. And Montgomery. That was prior to this ordinance. And they were able to enforce that.
Mercer and what?
Montgomery?
Mercer and Montgomery?
Mercer and Montgomery.
No, not
don't
Mercer and Montgomery, Mercer. What is that little tiny street across?
Franklin?
Franklin and Montgomery, excuse me, Franklin
I'm a
and
realtor.
Montgomery. And we know that. And they had the ability to wipe out that corner.
But there was another ordinance in effect at that time, and if we repeal this, there would be no ordinance in effect.
I don't think that's.
So maybe we
That,
just
that,
recommend
I
that they
think that's
enforce it.
excellent. That works for me. You know, what we have is we don't have a defective ordinance. We've got a lack of will on the council.
So now, what is the motion?
The motion is to repeal it for lack of enforcement. That's the motion. You guys can decide what you want to do.
Is there a second to that?
Wait a minute, repeal it for lack of.
Or lack of
enforcement.
enforcement?
For lack of enforcement,
So we're
we
still
have a
rec-
solution looking for a problem.
So we're still giving them an option, though?
No.
We're
He's-
not?
He's saying that we're recommending.
They don't have to take it up on it. They're the council. They do whatever they want.
And if,
Yeah,
This is just a recommendation, get rid of it.
and if they want to enforce it, we have the
Actually,
language.
we had a motion on the floor and seconded to enforce or repeal.
Okay,
Don't we have to deal with that before we come
Yes.
to another one?
okay, do you withdraw your motion?
Okay,
Do you withdraw your motion?
No, we'll go with the enforce or repeal, geez, right?
Oh, okay,
We're gonna see how that vote comes out.
okay, so enforce or repeal? That's what we're, okay, and is there a second?
Yes.
It was
I did.
seconded.
Okay, then Chair Ulrich,
Yes.
Member Daddy,
Yes.
Member Murphy,
Yes,
Member Farmer,
yes.
and myself, yes.
Great.
okay. Onwards.
And by the way, the name of the fence company's on the tag.
In case you,
Phone number.
Is there anything in this electric vehicle charging station that is something that we should seriously consider to make changes to or modify? It's,
in the last
it's a
6 months.
brand new, it's not even close to being a year old.
It's a one-time review. We have no recommendations, so it's up to you guys. We had to review all of the chapter, or excuse me, of the title, so.
Reminds me of something, is someone who's, for example, in that sort of business where they're renting something that's affixed to the earth, like a construction fence or temporary power company or I'm not talking about portable toilets, but, construction-related stuff like that. Are they required to get a business license? Do we know? For the
If
city?
they are doing business in the city, they should
Mhm.
have a city business license.
So can a
To fully answer that question, when building permits are issued, to final a permit for certain
Yeah.
projects,
Right.
they are required to go to the finance department with a list of their contractors, and the business license are checked.
So having said that, that reminds me of two things then. The aforementioned fence, just trying to help you guys out. Aforementioned fence, may or may not have, a business license. The company that erected it is, and I don't know if they're maintaining it or not, but, perhaps an inquiry or research should be made into the, file for that particular property, because something tells me there's no permit for that fence.
So they're doing business in Ojai without a permit?
Well, there's that, but I think the erection of the fence, which usually
Just-
requires a permit,
Just to be correct, if it's under 6 foot, doesn't require a permit.
in the city right of way, yes, it does.
It requires an encroachment permit.
That's a permit
That's
from
from
the. I got it.
Public Works. It's
Got
not, it also does require a zone clearance. I'm just
It's
being clear.
cascading.
Good,
It's cascading.
Good,
Just
let's,
being
let's,
clear.
let's just fix that.
Okay,
Yep.
so, all right, okay, discussion item 10.
No 27-inch footing.
Discuss and draft amendments to the City of Ojai Municipal Code Title IX, Building Regulations, Chapter 16, Electric Vehicle Charging Stations. Staff has no recommended changes. Staff does not anticipate any major fiscal impact from revising the City of Ojai Municipal Code. And this is very current. This is 2017.
Yeah, good.
Can I ask a question, though? Can a private person or company install one of the charging stations? That's what this permitting process is about?
Yep.
Just happened at Boku.
You can, private company, you can have a electric vehicle charging station in your
So they make money
house.
on that? How do they make money?
Yeah,
on that?
now, in order to get a
Yes.
tax credit, because I know they can get a
Yeah.
tax credit, do you have to have a licensed contractor do it, or can the homeowner do it?
I have no idea about tax credits. All I know is about building permits.
I
If
believe
it,
you
if
do.
it,
I don't
Tom,
want to issue a tax credit for something.
Well, I
that-
haven't got an electric.
if it's 24 volts or more, you gotta get a permit, and I'm pretty sure a homeowner, they're not gonna let do. Electrical.
And also, it's like, there's a couple of spots around town that are private, like Boku's one of them, the Inn has, Tesla station,
Okay.
and as well as some other.
Because I'm thinking about footing, depth of the trench is normally 18 inches. And I'm just, I was wondering, how many other people put those in and don't go the 18 inches?
Electric?
Uh, Well, if it's, they can be in a garage or something, so you wouldn't necessarily need trenching there. However,
Now, if they're bringing them from outside.
if they're bringing it in from outside, we do inspections on underground electrical prior to backfill. So we verify depths of all utilities being buried.
Okay.
Any recommended changes, anything we need to do in here?
Staff has no recommended changes.
So do we need to just say fine, or what's the
Yeah,
action taken?
I don't,
No changes?
No changes, so there's no motion to be made.
Are you
The
gonna,
truck is electric, right?
no, that's definitely not.
okay.
Yes.
Are we gonna go to next agenda items? Do we have new business next meeting? I see we have a recommendation to move the September meeting up a few weeks or week and a half to the end of August. What are we gonna put on that? What are we gonna put on that meeting?
So our plan, so I'll back up one step. So the California League of Cities is that week. And a couple people, including our council liaison and our building official, will be attending. So that's why we asked if we could reschedule. It also will work positively for, I think, the BAB, because we're going to try to bring back the changes for that meeting, which will then mean we can get that done on August 29th and then get it to the the city attorney for his review and keep this going fairly quickly.
Okay. As of last night, city council and a discussion the mayor and I had at Casitas meeting at 4, they had bantered around a number of thoughts, and I approached them today and said, look, if you're going to have these Title IX things, and they're about water and they're about building, I said, we've asked a number of times for planning commission to come in and talk to us about the things they want. So what I'd like to bring up is a number of items. I'd like to include those items that were brought up last night under Title IX, and I'll restate a few of them. Gray water is actually permitted per code. I don't know if it's in our code, but it should be. It should state that gray water is permitted per code. We should also offer a change for commercial especially, maybe residential, for recirculating water heaters only, no on demand. We got plenty of natural gas to heat it. We just don't have enough water going through the pipes to dump it out while we're waiting for it to get warm. Water's the thing that we need to conserve the most. When we have these commercial buildings and commercial build-outs and commercial changes like the cleaners, and we're going to have food and bars, we need to go to flushless urinals, waterless urinals, and we need to make sure that all of the old fixtures are changed. Is that happening? Are we making them change these? Did we make them change in the new joint there, toilets and that type of stuff? Those all new?
Any other construction, if it's touched, then it has to be brought up to current code. If it's not touched, then you don't have to bring it up to current code.
Okay, so
With the exception of accessibility, because accessibility you have to do in
that's ADA.
commercial,
That's
yeah.
a different.
You have to do a certain percentage of the cost and put it back into. But as far as changing out fixtures and stuff like that, it's strictly if you touch it, then you have to bring it up to current code.
Now,
So can we write a code that if you touch the front door and anything inside, then it needs to be brought up for the plumbing? Can we do that instead of individual utilities? I'm sorry?
You can have a repair.
yeah,
I mean, there could be some sort of repair that's done also too.
if you have a toilet and you're replacing the flooring underneath it, the toilet has to be removed. The toilet can be replaced back.
Exactly.
That's not replacing. That's not a replaceable moment.
Okay, how do we make it a replaceable moment for our current code
Well,
and for water conservation?
I think you've already addressed it. When it becomes, there's a modification, in other words, there's a change in use, it requires an upgrade. That's what happens. Becomes a condition.
So whenever we have a modification, we need solar wiring for future solar fixtures. We need the water.
That's actually going to be part. That's actually so. In the next building code, it's going to be required. You have to have solar ready area under current new buildings. It's required to have solar ready areas and all this kind of stuff. So
Under change of use?
not under change of use, because you don't necessarily have the square footage on the roof to
Yeah,
put.
it's a design element. You can't
Yeah.
just impose solar on, they either don't have the dirt or they don't have the roof.
Okay, but we can change the water use, like they talked about last night.
There are, I mean, I know of cities that have done local amendments to help reduce water flow. Some are favorable, some aren't. Dual flush toilets is one thing, or less than dual flush or less than 1.28 gallons per flush is a way to a measure that's been implemented. Recirculating pumps. For commercial, it's typically they don't necessarily have a hot water heater that for bathrooms or you know, necessarily, but
Okay.
for on-demand systems, they would use a point-of-use hot water system. So your censored faucet would turn on and there's already hot water there because right underneath is where the source of the heat comes from. So those are usually electric. I
Ooh,
know-
that's not a good use of,
And then there are, you could put a censored faucet in a residential restroom so that when you're brushing your teeth, the faucet doesn't stay on, you're not wasting water. There are things like that that can be implemented.
could you give us a recommendation of what changes that we could implement that give us the most savings of water? Water's what's critical. Tourists aren't critical. Costs aren't critical. Water savings is critical.
We have such a short amount of time between now and the next meeting. We could put it on the next meeting agenda as a discussion item. I don't think I'm going to have time to get a staff report ready in that short amount of time, but we could
That's
put
fine.
it on as a discussion
fine.
We could have a
item.
discussion that would allow the
As
BEV
long
to
as we
make
start, is that
recommendations.
we've talked about this, the city council and the city's talked about this and the planning commission's talked about this for 5 years. Nobody's ever put it down as a discussion item, so.
It's a
That'll
priority
be a
right now.
start.
I would agree. Well, so what we'll do, assuming the BAB approves the change to the August 29th meeting, we'll put an item on there to allow the discussion. We just won't have a lot of time to do the staff work.
And that, because the other item that we're going to have, just for clarity's sake, is going to be the final review of the BAP changes to entitle the entire Title IX chapter. Title.
Well, that should be a fairly bulky packet. So,
Well, I'm not gonna, I'm gonna just put in the changes.
Changes, yeah,
As
yeah,
it would
yeah.
read in the municipal code. I'm not gonna add all the other stuff.
okay, so do we need to I thought we all agreed we were available for the 29th.
Yes.
And the fire map. When are we gonna bring the fire map? I mean, if we take a look and if there's any reasonable people left in this community, it's pretty certain that CAL FIRE has more important things to do than come back.
So I've reached out to CAL FIRE this week and asked them for a timeline. And assuming my assumption and probably your assumption as well, if they are not able to give us a timeline and an expected date, my recommendation is to take it back to council. There's obviously a couple of factors there. One is I haven't heard back from them, and the second is I do not control the council agenda, so I'm going to make that recommendation, but it's not.
No, and that's fine. The mayor asked me today, where's the fire map? And I said, hey, we're gonna eat the elephant all in one sitting.
And then the other item that goes with that, since you've asked, is we talked to the fire chief, Captain / Chief McNeil.
Chief McNeil.
Chief McNeil, I always get his title wrong. So we talked to Chief McNeil about the idea of using the pool, and I can't, I guess, get all into it because it's not agendized, but just quickly, he had said that is a good idea. The challenge is it would have to be a statewide initiative because he said whenever there's a serious incident and other people respond, his thought is that they're not going to be aware of it. So
Standards.
yeah, so we can include that recommendation with the fire map when we bring it back. But I would note that was McNeil's comment.
I mean, we
about
can come up with a designation. We can get a 50-cent piece size reflecting piece of green eye glass. So when anybody goes down, it's on your mailbox. That would designate each and every individual. The reason I'm bringing this up is when the fire was really rolling, I went out to Ranch Matilaha. There was at the entire huge subdivision, one single sign in front of a house that says pool for drafting. Nothing else. And we know that we have critical water shortages here. And where it gets to be really critical is at elevation. The higher we can get the pools in elevation, the easier we're going to have, because until we start the project, and they just released today, they approved today the engineering at Casitas, just to do the study for the hydrants. So we know we've got a couple of more big fire seasons for that. So the sooner we can get on this, the better off we'll be.
Agreed.
Okay, in that case, then I'm going to call this meeting adjourned at 7:51.
Thank both of you very, very much. We really appreciate your efforts. I am amazed that we're really 90% through this.
Yeah, we're getting there.
Jim, I heard from the rookie guys way back to you.
I was gonna ask if he had reached out.
Yeah,
Yeah, so.
yeah, she's doing a lot better. He was coming tonight, but he decided that he'll be here by 1 or 2 o'clock.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he